Before we get into it, how much do you think this roof structure cost? Stick around because at the end of the video I'll break down every single expense for you. Hi everyone, this is Mark, and for the first time I finally get to sit on my own roof, built by our own hand, and enjoy a well-deserved sunset after some long hard days. But let's just rewind a few days and start from the very beginning. And trust me, not everything went as planned. The best part wasn't just having plenty of help from my dad and my father-in-law to build the roof together, it was finally getting the electricity connected and the utility box installed right in front of my property. This moment was a long time coming. I waited a year and a half for it. Once all the wall plates were bolted down and everything looked good, it was time to mark out where the rafters would sit. We spaced them every 90 centimeters and started setting them in place. And of course, my dad was fully aligned with construction standards, showing up in his legendary professional work outfit, also known as his swimming shorts. At this point, I don't even try to argue. He brings most of the knowledge to the table, so I guess the dress code is entirely up to him. The rafters were right at the bottom of the pile, so I had to move everything around just to get them before moving on to the next step. The next step was to mark out a series of lines on the concrete to create a template for one of the rafters, which we could then use to duplicate the rest, since all of them needed to be identical. For me, it was honestly pretty nerve-wracking. I had zero knowledge and didn't fully understand what we are doing here. It was also our first day of working on the ground. We had a couple of welcome drinks, and at this point I was just hoping we wouldn't mess it up. Eventually we got it done and decided to shift our focus to food and drinks, leaving the rest for the next day, when we would be fresh and full of energy. The only question on my mind was, did we actually do it right? The first cut turned out surprisingly straight, and that's when I said, "Alright dad, that's all yours." So pretty much he ended up doing all the cuttings. Meanwhile, my father-in-law showed up as well, so the team was full and finally we could work together. We created a perfect template, making sure all the edges were sharp and straight, so we could simply place it onto the next rafter and trace exactly where each cut needed to be made. We were all really happy with how it turned out, and even though we spent quite a bit of time on the first piece, I'm sure that level of precision will pay off in the end. We already had 4 pieces cut, so I said let's try assembling these first and then we will continue with the rest. It felt like a huge milestone. I was genuinely hyped and excited to finally see those first rafters goes up. The moment finally came, and suddenly we just stood there frozen, because that was the moment when we knew we f***ed it up. We went back to the planning phase and double checked all the numbers, because something was clearly off. The rafters were not really fitting as they should, the top ends weren't touching each other, and the opening was too wide. The numbers all checked out, so something had to be off with the drawings. We were quite unlucky at the same time. The rain we had during the evening washed away most of the drawings on the ground, which made it really difficult to trace where the problem was coming from. Eventually, we redrew everything and figured out where the problem was. We accepted it, talked it through, and just moved on. It was time for round 2. We added a couple of temporary horizontal planks across the rafters to make them easier to lift and position, then secured the top together with a couple of screws. We moved the first piece of this endless puzzle into place and secured it with a 26 cm heavy-duty screw, which I had bought earlier, but I'll break down all the costs later on. When everything looked good, we got into a full-on mass production. My dad handled all the cutting, while my father-in-law and I took care of the quality control and the heavy lifting. I was expecting it to go faster, but in the end we spent almost the entire day just cutting. Before the sunset, we managed to install a few more triangles and secure them in place temporarily. The next morning the scaffolding arrived. We rented it for a few weeks to finish the roof. Looking back, I'd actually recommend buying one of these at the start of the build. It might work out much cheaper for the long run, and it's definitely one less thing to organize when you always have it on hand. It was a bit of a vintage setup, but it did the job. The planks though were in pretty rough condition, so I had to keep repairing them throughout the build. My father-in-law helped with the scaffolding, climbing around like Spider-Man. You would never guess it, but he was just about to turn 70 and still pushing forward like a man half his age without a single complaint. But I guess that's their generation, they just do what it takes. Once we got the hang of installing the rafters, things started moving quickly, and we managed to finish the rest in just one afternoon. This was a big visual milestone. It completely reshaped the house, and for the first time it actually started to look like one. Enjoy this short time lapse from the whole afternoon. The last job of the day was starting with the ridge beam. The highest beam in the house, it adds strength to the structure and keeps all the rafters together. This was the first of the 3 pieces, a solid 5-meter beam, and yeah, it was heavy. For now, we just placed it there temporarily because the collar ties will hold it up later. I started sanding down 4 rafters that are going to be on the outside. They might end up visible, I'm not 100% sure yet what the final solution will be, but I figured it better to sand them down now and get rid of that green color. Next, I applied a protective layer of paint, giving the wood a clean finish and extra durability. We also treated the end of the ridge beam the same way. There's a good chance it will be remaining visible, so it made sense to take care of it now. We installed the back ridge beam and secured it with screws on each rafter. At the same time, we made sure the spacing at the top matched the spacing at the bottom. We used a simple piece of wood to stick between those rafters. And finally, the last missing piece, the middle ridge beam. It went in perfectly, no adjustments, no fixing. Looks like this time the measurements actually paid off. At some point my dad just disappeared, so we carried on without him and started working on the end pieces. This one was a bit sketchy, nothing under our feet, leaning over the edges, not exactly the most comfortable position. With one man down, it took a bit longer, but hey, still got the job done. A bit later, my dad was back. Turns out he didn't disappear for no reason. He came back armed with ice cream. Can't complain. On a hot summer day, that's probably the best kind of surprise. That sugar boost came at the perfect time because the next step wasn't straightforward as we hoped. The end of the wall plate wasn't perfectly aligned, leaving us with about 1 centimeter gap, so we had to convince it into place with a bit of force. Next, we installed the collar ties, pieces of wood that connect the rafters at the top of the roof. The original plan was to add a pair from each side, but in the end, we went with just one. They were already massive, and adding more would have been overkill. Alright, let's break down the costs and see how much of the roof structure has set us back so far. It's not finished yet, but I'll bring you a new update in 2 weeks, so stay tuned and subscribe. The timber for the roof structure cost us 5,180 zloty, including 200 delivery fee. For threaded rods, nuts and washers, I spent 290. For wooden planks, to temporarily cover the second floor, I spent 300. Additional 300 on screws and 600 for the scaffolding, including delivery. This was all the must-have spendings for this video, but on top of that, I spent roughly 1,500 on tools I needed. Things like sander, petrol and oil for the tools, drill bits, you name it. It really depends on what you already have in your workshop. Unfortunately, I'm still building up my tool collection, so most of the time I have to buy what I need. And this beauty, it set me back 1,151 zloty, but no regrets, worth every penny, and it definitely added a lot of value to the property. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. If you don't want to miss it, make sure to subscribe, drop a like, and let me know in the comments what you think so far. It really helps the channel grow. And if you like to support the channel and what we do here, you can do it as little as the price of a coffee. The link is in the description. Thanks for watching. Mark is out. Peace.